Hello, 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 and welcome to PitchZone, a weekly live show on YouTube where Nathan Gold and I are inviting a guest that has something of value to offer to executives and entrepreneurs who want to level up their presentation game. Now, today's guest is a very, very special guest. But before we get to him, let me bring in Nathan Gold. Nathan, good morning. Early morning in San Francisco. How is the weather?
Oh, well, it looks like it's going to be a beautiful day here today, looking out the window there, and sunshine, 70, 80, roughly, we're expecting. Thanks for
Lovely,
asking.
lovely, lovely. And you are actually responsible for our guest today. You've introduced us, when was that? In 2020, I believe. And you and he go
Hmm.
back a long, long time already. I'll give you the honor to introduce Mr. John Bates.
Uh-huh. So put me on the spot. I didn't prepare to do this, but that's an easy one to do because when I
Exactly.
met John over a dozen years ago, it was through my brother-in-law who had seen John do a talk at his Vista program. And I contacted John and said, "Hey, do you mind if I sit in on one of your sessions?" My brother-in-law said, "Maybe there's something we can do together." Because we had not similar, but like-minded topics, we'll call it. Because what John's going to talk about today is nowhere near my wheelhouse in one very particular area, which I'm very excited to hear about. But long story short, I went to the event, I sat in the audience, and John, I know you're listening, and I'm not patronizing you when I tell you this, but I walked out with 5 pages of notes. The examples that he gave, the stories he shared, the exercises he had us do were literally mind blowing. And I was very early in my consulting career at that moment. I think maybe, John, I don't know the exact date. Maybe it was maybe 2 years into my consulting when we met. And that moment when I saw you do what you did on that stage with that group of people, I thought, okay, I got a lot of growing to do. I got things to learn, but I'm going to keep moving forward. So, ladies and gentlemen, John K. Bates is probably one of my favorite coaches on the planet. People who literally will take whatever you're saying and doing today and make you better. There's just no way about it. No two ways about it. So I hope that he's from Salt Lake City, Utah, right, John? Or just outside Salt Lake?
That
Let's welcome
we
John.
live in Salt Lake.
Salt Lake. Welcome to the
Thank
show,
you,
John.
Nathan.
John,
Thank you. God, that just is so great to hear. I'm so honored, and I guess I've heard parts of that, but I've never heard it like that before, and I'm just so honored. I talk about you in a similar way, I have to say, because when your brother-in-law came up to me after seeing me, and he said, "Hey, um, I've got a friend who is the demo god, and he's won the demo god award like multiple times, you know, and I knew what that meant because demo is this conference. You guys have probably talked about it here, but all the best software companies come and present, and it's a big deal. And you've won the demo god award there many times, and this is a really good lesson, I think, for anybody who hasn't gotten this lesson yet, and I had to get it myself then. But he said, he was the demo god and he does pitch coaching, and do you want to meet him? And I was like, my monkey mind, that crazy roommate we all have that's never very positive about anything, was like, oh yeah, of course I want to meet him. Like, we're competition, he's going to steal all my stuff, like blah 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 blah, and but I've learned not to listen to my monkey mind. So what came out of my mouth was, yeah, I'd love to meet him. And he's like, well, give me your card. I gave him my card. And the people never follow through on stuff like that usually. But boy, within a few minutes, he had introduced us. And then when I came back up and you came and joined us, I just thought you were so cool. And then afterwards, you actually offered to buy me a coffee, and Sharon and my wife Sharon and and you sat down over a coffee. And then I don't know if you know, I think I've told you, but when you called me a little while later and said, "Hey, I'm supposed to go to Slovakia to do this event and I can't make it. Do you want to go?" Right? It's not a big paying gig. It was like, I don't know, 1,000 euros, but they'd pay my flight over or something, right? And put me up. And I said, "Well, yeah, gosh, of course." Cause like Nathan, I wasn't as far into my career as you were into yours. And so I was just taking anything that came my way, and I love Europe and I thought that would be great. So I went and did that. And one of the things that came out of that is that in the United States, when you tell people you do work in Europe, they think that's really cool. And in Europe, when you tell people that you've been pitching and raising money in the United States, they think that's really cool. So, so going to do that and getting that on my resume and getting that as one of the things I could talk about that I did, just I think really had a huge impact on my career and on my client base and growing my client base. So you made an enormous contribution to me with that. And I made all kinds of contacts over there and been back to Europe a whole bunch because of it, and got involved in the Chamber of Commerce over there. So, you know, I think that the lesson there is don't listen to your monkey mind. And here we are. We're all three pitch coaches, and
Mm-hmm.
I, wouldn't trade my friendship with you guys for anything. And I think that we make each other better. And I'm glad I didn't listen to my monkey mind. I guess that's all I'm trying to say.
Oh, I love it. I love it, John. And this is a perfect segue to say hello to our friends who are joining us live on YouTube right now. So let's quickly say hello to Philip Sparks. He's joining us from Frankfurt in Germany. We have
Herzliche
Massimo.
Willkommen.
Herzlich willkommen, jawohl. We have Massimo Peroncelli from Thailand. John, want to give it a
Bow bow
try?
bo bo. Bow bow bo bo.
Well,
That's all
Massimo
I
is
know how
from
to say. Hopefully.
Massimo is from Italy originally, so maybe
Oh,
that gives you
okay.
a better chance.
Prego. That's all I can say.
All right.
Ciao, Bella.
Ciao, Bella.
Bello.
Yeah.
And
Hello.
we have Haley McLean. Haley, oh, it is such a pleasure to see you here, Haley. Thank you for making time to join us. We have Kirk Bogle, and thank you, Kirk, for joining us here. And Scott Peak, also from Colorado. So absolutely great. And Michael Sessoms, great to see you here today as well.
I
And
was just in Dallas.
Haley is one step ahead of you. It's Savadi Krap.
Sawadika. Yeah,
Yes,
Sawadika.
all
Yeah.
right, all
When,
right. So, John, one of the things that you are very, very well known for, besides coaching executives at NASA and Johnson & Johnson and some really, really big corporations, is your involvement with TED and TEDx.
yeah.
And you've wrote a book, The Amazing Itty Bitty Guide to Being TED Worthy. It's somewhere back on the bookshelf. There we go. And to all of us, to all who joined us here today, it's really itty bitty, can be read in a night before your big presentation. And one lucky person today will actually get a copy of this itty bitty little guide to being TED worthy. So stay tuned. We will have a drawing later on. But before we do that, I'm really, really curious. TED is one of the most nerve-wracking stages in the world, right? I mean, the preparation that goes in there. I can only think of one other one, and that's maybe Shark Tank, where the preparation is so unbelievable. And in that case, it's even more dynamic because you have to deal with questions that you may not anticipate. But
Yeah.
TED, let's start with TED, John. How do you prepare somebody who comes up to you and says, "Hey, I've got this great idea
Yeah.
and I've been accepted to talk at TED or TEDx."
Yeah.
How do you
So
start them out?
Well, first of all, the first thing is that is a different format. It's really, really important to just understand that getting on that TED stage or that TEDx stage is very, very different for the vast majority of people than anything that they've ever done before. It's not a keynote. It's not, you know, some of the people that do the worst there are some of the people that are the most well-known keynote speakers because they don't get the difference that that stage requires. All the talks are 18 minutes or less. And so it's very, very quick. And the number one piece of coaching from TED that TED speakers get is, what is your one idea worth spreading? Not your top 3 or your best 5 or the 6 pillars of this. Like, no, what is your one idea worth spreading? And getting really clear on that is much harder than most people realize. And that takes some time, and it takes you really digging in and getting clear about what is your one idea we're spreading. And so, if somebody's working on that, let me tell you another quick little bit of coaching that I give people, because a lot of times people will come in with their one idea we're spreading. They'll come back to me and they'll say, okay, here it is. Well, when the pirates back in the day used to bury their treasure, they would dig 8 feet down and put the big treasure in. And then they'd throw in 2 feet of dirt and put a small treasure at 6 feet down. And when people were trying to find the treasure, they'd dig 6 feet down, find the small treasure, and think they'd found the treasure, right? But if they just would have dug 2 feet deeper, there would be the big treasure. So when you're looking for that one idea we're spreading, make sure you dig that extra 2 feet after you find it, just to make sure that what you found is the real treasure. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Oh, it sure
yeah.
does. Sure does. Speaking of big treasures, when Dolph Lundgren came to you for coaching for his TED,
Yeah.
I would like
One of
you
the
to share.
expendables.
I'm just so intrigued by that
Yeah.
particular coaching that you did,
Yeah.
because of his performance on stage was just authentic, honest, real, heart wrenching.
Yeah. Gosh, you're
Can you
giving
tell
me
us a little bit
goosebumps.
of the
Yeah.
backstory without maybe stepping on any privacy issues?
Yeah, no, there's no privacy issues there because Dolph was very open and wanted to be very open about that. Boy, but you just gave me goosebumps down to my wrists and my ankles, because he came in. So, there's a lot of lessons to learn from my interaction with Dolph Lundgren. The first thing is, he is an actor, so he's very, very coachable, because as an actor, you take direction from the director, and that's how it goes. So he was extremely coachable. He came in wanting to talk about how he had been through this healing process, right? And how hurt people, and healing yourself is the first step to healing the world. And he had just been through a real process of forgiveness and healing and all of that. And he wanted to talk about it. But what we did is, we started with a really, and I don't want to ruin the talk necessarily. Maybe you guys can put a link to it, or you can just search. It's easy to find. Search Dolph Lundgren TED. Um, but he started with just an absolutely gripping story. And then he went back and kind of talked about how that happened. And then he talked about the rest of his life and how that incident and many like it affected him, and then how he had this great transformation, you know. And so he was extremely coachable, something that most people don't realize about Dolph Lundgren, because he was in Rocky, right? And he was he played that big Russian boxer, I guess, with the blonde hair, and I will crush you. And people think that he's not people don't realize that he is incredibly smart. He was a Fulbright scholar, and he was, you know, did very, very well in school. I think it was engineering. And then he just got this amazing opportunity to be an actor and, you know, hang out with this top level of a bunch of actors. And who wouldn't have taken that, you know? So, so that was the big lesson for me, was how I thought he would be unwilling to be coachable, but he was ultra coachable. And he's actually a super nice guy and a very, very smart guy. And it was a great, great experience. So when, you know, when you see him in a movie, you can smile and know that he's a good dude. He has had a deep transformation, because he wasn't necessarily always the nicest guy. And he talks about it in his talk, right, Nathan?
Yes, he does. Yeah. And in fact, he starts out the talk that way. I encourage everybody
Yeah,
to watch it, because it makes the actor, people we see on stage or on the films, more
yeah,
real, you know,
yeah.
much more real. So on that track, John, I would like you to please share with the audience how you, when the script is written or it's in place and you know what you want to say on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any, what do you tell people when they say, oh, I got to memorize this script now, and then I got to get up there and I have to do this script? I mean, most people on that stage are so far away from memorizing an
Yeah,
18-minute or 9-minute
right.
monologue that trying to do that is generally very difficult, unless you
So
have, from what I've seen, many weeks of practice to get that script into your head so that
yeah,
it's memorized way beyond, oh yeah, that's right, this word's coming. It's like it's just got to be able to be said with music going and dogs barking, and then you start performing the script. But what I find
yeah.
is most people say I'm memorized and they don't work hard at now the performance aspects. Can you talk about that? Because I really want to hear what you do.
Well, so there's a few things there. The first thing is, and I'm going to group together a few things. The first thing is, I have a thing called the Bates equation, which is 1 times 20 times 3,000, or 1 times 20 times 3,000. That's right. That's 60,000 minutes. We divide by 60 to get hours. That's 1,000 hours of human life that I consume with one 20-minute talk to 3,000 people. 1,000 hours of human life gets used up in that. And I don't want to prepare. Yeah, no, I don't want to prepare, like, because like I'm good at winging it, you know, like I used to win contests winging it, and I just wing it. And for most of my career, I was the best speaker or one of the best speakers at the conference. But what I didn't realize is how low the bar was, right? I'd go in and wing it and usually be one of the best, but man, the bar was super low. And then it got to a point in my career where I had to admit that by winging it, I would get uneven results. And at a certain point, uneven results were not acceptable. And then I went to TED and I just saw a whole new level of public speaking and got really turned on by that. I was like, that's really powerful. And I have not been doing that. So I got very involved in the TED and TEDx community. And do you know how long most people practice before they speak at TED? You want to guess?
I would hope that they prepare at least 1 to 2 hours for every minute on stage.
Okay, so you're jumping ahead. You're a good student. They prepare, people at TED prepare for more than a year, most of them. They know they're going to be speaking at TED and they start working on their talk a year plus before they actually get on the stage. And I have a very good friend who worked with Steve Jobs on all those great talks that he gave. And after they would create the talk, and that took a lot of work to begin with, but after they create the talk, Steve would commit to practicing for an hour for every minute that he was going to be on stage. That's why we call him the natural communicator, right? Is because we don't want to be responsible for working as hard as he did to be a natural communicator, right? And you know who he stole that from? Winston Churchill.
Hmm.
Winston Churchill, an hour for every minute. So, when it really matters, there's, and the problem is people then say, but John, if I practice that much, then it's going to look like I practiced, it's going to seem robotic and whatever. And look, there is this place where you practice so much that it looks like you practiced a lot. And that's not the goal, right? And then there's this thing that I call the valley of awkwardness in honor of Chris Anderson at TED. And to get across the valley of awkwardness, that just takes more practice. And you get to a point where you've practiced so much that it looks like you didn't practice. And that's the goal. And then when it comes to written out word for word, sorry, I'm a little dry. And I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Utah is a very dry state. Like the air is dry. So, you know, the other thing is that I forgot what I was going to say. So you get to this place where it looks like you didn't practice, and word for word. Now,
That's it.
look, the problem with word for word, and I admit some of those TED Talks are practiced word for word. They get written out word for word and they practice it word for word, but they have a year and they practice that whole time, right? And they take great effort to turn it from a well-written speech into a well-spoken speech. So what I do with most normal humans who don't have a year to work on what they're going to do is I tell them there's a problem with word for word. There's two big problems. The first problem is that the last time a well-written speech worked was the Gettysburg Address. That's the last time a well-written speech worked. So what people want is to hear you say it like you speak it, not like you write it. And most of us write very differently than we actually speak. And then a lot of people will get really caught up in how beautifully they wrote it and want to use those words because they love how beautifully they wrote it, but it doesn't come out sounding like they talk. So what I have people do is if they want to write it out, that's fine. But I have them move over to a very, very Spartan outline, like bullet points with one or two words, no complete sentences at all. And I have them work from that outline with very Spartan, very little writing, but an outline, and practice it out loud. And out loud is the key. I think we all probably know that. Like practicing it in your head, quietly in your head, does not count. Got to practice it out loud from the outline over and over and over until they can just do it again, do it, in their sleep, standing on one foot backwards. It just takes that much practice to really look like you didn't practice.
That's absolutely amazing when you think about, the preparation that goes in there, right? And the quote, I
It's
think it's
amazing.
Benjamin Franklin said something about if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. And
Yeah.
if you
Yes.
want to fail on a stage like that, not a very good idea. Now, there is a lot of preparation going in that. And your skill is to distill the stories from those speakers. How do you
Mm.
go about it, right? Because as you said before, there is a hole to dig, and maybe your clients by themselves, they would stop at the 6 feet. How do you get them down onto that 8 foot level? And what are the kind of questions that you use to distill those stories that they have inside them, but they may not even know that they have them inside?
Boy, you just said a mouthful, and that's so true. People all have stories, and many people think, oh yeah, well, John, you ran away with your rock band and you raised several $100 million in Silicon Valley with your various companies, and you obviously have exciting stories. I don't have any exciting stories. I hear that all the time. No. you're a human being and you have had a life. And that means you have amazing, great stories. We just got to find them. And so the number one story that I work with most people on, because I think it's always a great thing to toss into your TED like talk. I also think I shouldn't say toss, to craft into your TED like talk. I also think it's a fabulous way to start pitches, by the way. And I can talk about that a little bit if you want. But
Mhm.
I work with people on their origin stories. And, you know, if you're listening to this right now, you are doing something in your life, with your life, that you are passionate about. Because if you've got it together enough that you're here listening and that you have, you're doing your day job and all that kind of stuff, the reason you ended up doing this is because you're super passionate about it. And how I know that is because every time you came to a fork in the road, you chose this over that. And every time that you chose this over that, it led you to exactly where you are right now. And if what you're doing with your life right now is not worth your life, if it's not worth giving your life to, then go find something else. But like, I think that everybody listening to this is doing what they're passionate about because they ended up doing it, if that makes sense. And there are a bunch of great, what I call leadership stories, a bunch of great leadership stories. If you look back over your timeline at those major forks in the road, and one of those is going to be a perfect origin story for
Mhm.
the pitch that you're doing or the TED talk that you're doing. So I walk people back through those challenging moments and those difficult forks in the road. And those are the best ones, by the way, like where it was a difficult choice to make or where you got knocked on your butt and you had to get back up and do something about it. Those are really, really important moments in your life, and they're important stories. And we get a lot out of going back and looking at those stories and re-examining them, then looking for that golden thread that goes through all of them, that is connected to your passion and why you're doing what you're doing right now and why you chose this over that every time. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And we are getting so much value from you here, John. And of course, in your book, there is even more value. So let's very, very quickly get to that. For
Okay.
those that are live here, in the comments, simply write I want if you want that book, and that gives me all of the names that I will put onto into our drawing here. And while you do that, I would like to move on, switch gears a little bit, because I was also teasing our audience about your expertise with neurosciences. And you were mentioning before, the monkey brain and how that impacts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, you know, if you haven't heard of the monkey mind, let me introduce you to the monkey mind here. Just be with me for just a second and, watch me here on video, and I'm just going to be with you and we're going to meet the monkey mind. Monkey mind? I don't have a monkey mind. Maybe he has a monkey mind. I don't have a monkey mind. Like, what's all that stuff behind him? I see his lights in the glare. Where'd they find this guy anyway? Right. Okay. So did you hear it? That
Mhm,
voice in your head? Right.
mhm.
And as soon as things quieted down, like all of a sudden it started having opinions and comments and thoughts, and I don't have a monkey mind and all that. Okay. That's your monkey mind. And the really important thing to know about that is that that's not you. That's your monkey mind. That's what the Buddhists call it, right? It's your monkey mind. And it is that crazy voice in your head that's scared of everything, doesn't trust anyone, doesn't like anybody. I think of it like my scared inner child, right? It's just trying to keep me safe, but it doesn't want me to stand out. It doesn't want me to get noticed. It doesn't trust anybody. It thinks everybody's out to get me. It just says all this nasty stuff. So that is not you. You are the big silent presence that's hearing that thing. And now that you know that there's daylight between that voice and who you actually are, you get a choice about whether or not you're going to listen to that thing. Right. And I have learned, like I said earlier, not to listen to that thing because it doesn't really help. Right. It usually makes things worse. It's trying to help. So what I do is I acknowledge it by saying out loud some of the things it's saying, like, it's saying about me right now, like, Nathan and Claudio are better than I am. And like, people are going to think I'm too California woo woo. And gee, I look tired, and, all the negative stuff. Right. So I take it out of the driver's seat and I put it in the back seat and I belt it in because it doesn't know how to use the seatbelt yet. And then I put into the front seat who I really want to be today. So here on PitchZone, who I really am is the drill instructor for your greatness over there in your world, and playful mastery. That's what I'm bringing, right? That's what
Mhm.
I say I'm bringing. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but I hear it really loudly. The monkey in the back seat is screaming, "Who says you have mastery? You don't have mastery. You should just shut up. Get off this show. You're making a fool of yourself. Hurry, get out of here." I've just learned not to listen to that thing, and I turn around sometimes and I pat it on the head and I say, "Thank you. I know you're trying to help, but I got this." Right?
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for this. I think we all learn now something, not just by listening to you, but by observing you, because you are really living what you're talking about, right? I mean, you had
Thank
me
you.
there, and all of a sudden I heard that monkey mind,
Right?
it's
It's
and
there.
absolutely brilliant. So I want to
Now,
bring up
eh,
quickly. Yeah, sorry.
can I
Go ahead,
can I
John.
tell you,
Sure, sure.
because we talked about the neurobiology, right? And it's not just that we all have a monkey mind. We
Hmm.
all have a monkey mind, okay? That is not you. That's your crazy roommate, comes free in the box with every human, right? But here's the scientific reason to do that little exercise I just did, to say out loud a few of the things it's saying about you and about the audience, and then get it in the back seat and belt it in and put in the front seat who you say you're going to be, is because that is the only way that you can effectively control all of that unconscious communication that's being sent by your facial micro expressions and your unconscious body language and even your word choice and your vocal stress, right? Because people say, "Hey, John, like 80% of your communication is nonverbal." And then someone will say, "No, no, no, that study was misunderstood. It's 90%. No, it's not. It's 65%. Okay, that's a dumb way to talk about it. Your body language and your nonverbal communication is not a percentage of your communication. It's 100% of the context within which everything you say gets heard. So if you're sending and leaking out your nervousness about being on stage, that is one context, and it's actually the opposite of what you're trying to say. So it's
Hmm.
holding you back. Whereas if you can get all of that unconscious stuff aligned with your actual message, now you're congruent, and it's going to go way better.
Hmm. Wonderful. Now, John, I'm looking at the clock right now, and I think we are only in about 10 minutes, but no, it's already more than 30 minutes, and I think we could go on and on and on. But let's very, very quickly get to the drawing of that book. And then I have a couple more questions that are lined up here in the comments section. I do not think we have
Okay.
time for all of them, but perhaps one or two of them. But first things first. So I have prepared all of the names here that we will be spinning. And if you are in the audience right now, I do hope I did not skip anybody. I think I got them all. So before we spin this wheel, let's shuffle the names a few times just to make it really super, super fair for everybody. And then we are gonna spin the wheel.
Woohoo!
And it is Michael. Michael,
Woohoo!
congratulations. Michael Sessoms. I'm not sure if you are still here. I think maybe not. So in any case, Michael, I know where you live, and we will get that book to you after the show pronto. So let's go to a few more questions here. And oops, that's the wrong button here. There are the questions, and let me pull up the actual questions. You can choose either one of these three, or you can really switch gears and answer them all. The first one, Philip wants to know, how do you suggest to your clients on how the spread works with TED? So people in the audience take more than just an 18-minute story and themselves spread it after the TED Talk. That's one of the
Okay,
questions.
yeah.
Okay, take it. Take it
So
immediately. Yes.
that is a great, great, great question. And one of the things that I think is super interesting from neurobiology and neuroscience is that so they did an experiment and they had someone tell a story, really, really well, and then maybe not as well. And they compared what happened. And the fundamental outcome of this whole long story of research is that when someone is in front of a group of people and they're telling a story, and I always call it a well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told story, and you put them in an fMRI machine and watch their brain patterns in real time as they're telling this well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told story. And then you do the same thing with the audience. You put them in an fMRI machine, you put each of them in and watch their brain patterns as they're listening. Very, very quickly, when it's a well-chosen, well-crafted, well-told story, those fMRI images start to look extremely similar. So it's called entrainment. A well-told story entrains the brains of your audience, and their brain patterns will start to very, very, very closely match your brain patterns. And this study showed that the more that the speaker telling that story could get those other people's brains to entrain and look similar to the speaker's brain, the more they could recall, the better they could recall the story, and the more it impacted them. And interestingly, the more that happened in the session where the first speaker was speaking, the better those people were at passing that on in a way that entrained the next group of people's brains or the next individual's brain. Now, did I explain that well? Did that make sense?
It did to me. I
Yeah.
would think it probably did to Philip as well. So let's get to the other two questions that are still hanging in here, and I think we can combine those two together. The first one is,
Yeah.
how is the monkey mind related to a focused flow state? And Joanna's question is it, the monkey mind, the same as ego?
Yeah. And listen, I don't know if in the psychological, you know, terms it would be the same as ego or not, but monkey mind is at the effect of and my mom studied with Yogi Bhajan, who brought Kundalini yoga to America, and she taught Kundalini yoga since 1973. And one of the things that she talks about a lot is negative ego and positive ego. And so monkey mind is a loudspeaker for negative ego, for sure, right? That negative aspect of your ego. Now, there's also a positive aspect of ego. So I don't want to throw ego under the bus completely, but monkey mind is worried about all that stuff that your ego, your negative ego is worried about, and it just blasts that stuff out. And I think in terms of its relationship to flow state, I think monkey mind, that probably is about the only time that I can think of when monkey mind really disappears, is when I'm in that real flow state. So I would say monkey mind is an inhibitory thing to flow state. And
Mm-hmm.
monkey mind, you can't get rid of your monkey mind. We all, once you realize it's there, it's like, how do I get rid of it? You can't. I think you can turn it down. I think turn down the volume. And I think in those moments of flow state, once you've managed to just let go of all of your concerns and you're in that flow, that's about the only time when the monkey's really quiet. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they're almost at opposite ends of the spectrum, you know? And imposter syndrome is a function of monkey mind, because the monkey's the one that's telling you that you're not qualified and that you're an imposter. Like, dude, I'm not good at this. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not right. That's your monkey mind. So that imposter syndrome comes from monkey mind, and everybody has imposter syndrome. So it's like we're working with equations that are fractions. And if you look at it, when you're working with fractions, if every fraction that you're working with has the same denominator on the bottom, we just divide by that denominator and get rid of it, right? Everybody's got imposter syndrome. Let's just divide by imposter syndrome and freaking toss it out. Like, everyone has it. So stop worrying about it.
That's an excellent way to segue to the end of the program here, John. And in place of Claudio ending the program, I have one more question for you. And the answer needs to be really short, but I believe every startup listening to this will appreciate this. Are you ready? Do you remember about 12, 13 years ago, you were about to quit? You were
I
making the
do.
decision to leave the business of coaching. And every startup goes through those challenges of, should I quit? Should I stop? Should I go? Would you mind sharing just a little bit of what kept you in the game?
So, I mean, are you talking about Melinda Richter and that
What I
thing?
remember is we met once and you said, I'm just not sure I want to keep doing this anymore. And then a couple of weeks later, you contacted me and said, something you said in that meeting with us, you caused me to do this, 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 and this, and I'm in the game. And maybe it was Melinda, maybe it was something else, but it was at least a dozen, 13 years ago. If you don't
Yeah.
remember exactly, what would you
Well,
tell a startup to do if they are trying to make a
well,
decision to stay in the game or not?
well, listen, I want to hear what you remember, but the thing that brings up for me the most is that when I was early on in this, I had my first really big deal client, Melinda Richter, who's now the global head of J Labs. She had this startup that was a really big deal. It ended up getting acquired by Johnson and Johnson, and she was speaking at a TEDx event, and she didn't want to meet with me. I was the coach for the TEDx event because she was already a really good speaker and she didn't have time and she didn't need me. And, so they said, look, will you please meet with him for one meeting and see what you think? And if you don't think you need him after that, great. So she said yes. And I went in, and at the end of that hour together, she looked at me and she said, John, you are way more than a speaker coach. You are an executive whisperer, and I am keeping you close. I'm introducing you to
Mm-hmm.
everybody that matters to me, and we are going to be friends for life. And I was so floored by that I, like, my jaw hit the table. And I said, thank you, Melinda. Thank you. And she said, when's our next meeting? And we scheduled the next meeting. And I walked out and I was on clouds. And every time since then that I have been tempted to give up on myself, I've heard her voice in my ears
Mm.
telling me that, and I've kept going.
Wow,
So
John.
that I think is that is one of the things that great leaders do, right? They bring out the greatness in the people around them and remind them of their greatness and have them see their greatness when they don't even know it's there yet. And, that has gotten me through a lot of really dark times and some difficult moments in my career of doing this.
John, thank you so much for sharing this. This is definitely a lot of value for anybody, because we all at one point come to that moment where we want to give up. And
Yeah.
luckily, we have people around us that support us and move us forward and nudge us in the right direction. We could go
Yeah.
on with this now for hours, I think. We just have warmed up. So, John, I would like to invite you in one future episode at one point, in a couple months again, just for a quick update, because this is pure gold. Thank you so much, John. Nathan, thank you as well. And everybody who joined us here live, thanks a lot for making this engaging, for your questions. And I hope that those that watch it on replay will get as much out of it as everybody who watched us here right now. And with that, I wish you all a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we shall see each other again next week. Bye-bye.